Hey everybody, today we're going to do a video update on the Grape Juice Isometrics module. This is an update video, so make sure to check out the first video that I made when the early access launched for more details. This should cover all the old and new features pretty well. I'm going to try and go pretty quick, because a lot of this is a review. Because videos on YouTube get old fast, just a reminder, this is a video made during Foundry version 0.7.9 of Foundry VTT, using version 0.0.16 of the Grape Juice Isometrics plugin. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover for reference. I'm not going to read all this out, but I will put timestamps in the description below for those that want to jump to a specific subject or feature. I think while things are in early access, this and the Patreon page are probably what you're going to get in terms of documentation. So things are moving quickly, so just jump to the subject if you already kind of understand the basics. So first off, just as a reminder, the plugin is in early access. So if you want to play around with it, you need to join the Grape Juice Patreon, and then you can get the download for the plugin in one of the Discord channels that unlocks when you're a Patreon subscriber. So you need to go and download that zip file and unzip it and put it in your modules folder of your Foundry VTT data. And then reboot your Foundry, and then it'll detect the module there, and you'll be able to enable it inside your world. So I covered this in the previous video, but just as a reminder, that's how you get access to this. And I'll put links to the Patreon below. Also, remember that in your scene settings, every scene needs to have token vision turned on in order for the plugin to work correctly. This is especially true in the newest versions that start doing some things called token culling. I got to tell you, I've lost 5-10 minutes just beating my head against the wall wondering, why is it not working? And it's because token vision is turned off. Just make sure token vision is always turned on, even if it's like, just a test scene or something where you're not really worried about line of sight. Just make sure token vision is turned on. You will save yourself time. So here I am, and I've logged into the most basic of possible top-down scenes. There's literally nothing going on here. It's just a normal grid. This is what you get by default. And I'm going to take a top-down hero, and I'm going to bring him in here. And the first thing I'm going to do is switch this to using an isometric grid. So I go into the scene settings, and down here you see there's an extra feature, Enable Isometric Mode. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to ignore the second little thing here. We'll cover that later in the video. And I'm going to save changes. Now you notice that it gets all weird, and that's because some of the stuff that makes it isometric only occurs when a scene first loads. So you need to switch to some other scene and then switch back. And now we're in isometric mode. Nice 30-degree angles for isometric. You'll see that the hero art is still top down, but it's sort of centered in a grid square that is in true isometric. Now the nice part about this is that we can start doing all of the normal measuring and other things that we want to do. But first, let's go grab a background image. So I'm going to go to the scene here. So I'm going to go and grab my normal gaming table composite template. And I know that this is on a 64 hex grid. And I'm going to go and hit Save Changes. And it says it's going to change a bunch of stuff, and that's fine. And when I do that and I zoom out, you notice it's kind of off, right? Like that was the center of my square, my map. And it's over here, and that's kind of annoying. And that's something that's fixed in a later, option. But let's just fix this right now. So the problem is that it's off-centering, and so I need to take the size of the map here and put it in negative in horizontal here, and that mostly fixes it. So yes, and now the map is a little bit more centered. I just want to make sure that there's actual grid over all of the playable squares that I want here. So I'm going to take my token, and I'm going to move them all the way down here. And now I notice also that the grid is a little off because I don't have it. So I'm going to go and configure this guy, and I'm going to hit this little ruler button, and I'm going to go in. And now the grid is already the perfect size because I started with a map that I knew had a 64 size. I just got to align that grid, commit the changes, hit yes, and then, oh my goodness, we're good to go, right? So here I've got my hero. The hero is on perfectly aligned to this background image. Now, another thing you might notice is that, so this is a top-down art, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some, let me go and change this. So I'm going to right-click him, or here, I'm going to go into his token, and I'm going to select some actual some actual art here. So I'm going to go into my compendium where I've got a bunch of Hero Forge stuff. Let's go find an interesting Hero Forge character. So let's grab this guy. So I select him and I update token, and you'll notice that he's too small, right? So compared to some of the other stuff, like how tall is this guy? If that grid top to bottom is 5 feet, this guy's less than 5 feet tall, and I wanted him to be, you know, something else. So remember that you can use the hex size token support module, which is not the isometric plugin. But you can do this to sort of just adjust the size of these characters a little bit, and maybe adjust the positioning of them so that the center here of the shadow, the base, whatever it is, fits perfectly. And now this guy's a little bit closer. This guy's like 6 feet tall now, 5 feet, 6 feet tall, and that's better. So I'll save the changes there. And now I've got a nice isometric character, and I can use all my measure tools appropriately. So I can go into the measurements. Well, first of all, just normal measuring distances. You know, it works perfectly on the grid in every dimension, which is really nice. And then I can also use the templates here to measure. So, you know, measuring, say like a lightning bolt works great. Measuring a, you know, a fire blast, right, in a cone works great. And I can rotate these using the normal controls of Foundry, or a square, or everybody's favorite, a fireball. It needs to be 20 feet, so it needs to be perfect. And you'll see there that it works perfectly. All right, great. Delete all of those. All right, so next, we're going to do a bit of a stress test. So let me jump over to a different top-down scene. And in this scene, you're going to see the absolute stress test of walls and doors. So there's a lot of kobolds inside a room that has 4 doors. You can enter it from any side. And this is like the worst possible setup for an isometric room, except for maybe having balconies on all sides. That would be even worse. So there's kobolds behind walls on the outside of the room, and there's kobolds tucked into the corners inside the room. So right now, this character, this is working perfectly. You can't see particularly well past that wall. But in top-down, this is simple. In top-down, he enters the room, open the door, walks in. He can count all of these correctly. And from inside the room, he can't spot the kobold on the outside. But when he walks to the outside, he can see it just fine. This is normal, right? We're used to this in top-down D&D. Just normal tactical play is very simple. All right, great. Well, what happens when we take this into isometric? Well, if I go to the scene and configure it and turn on the isometric mode, save, let me exit and come back. Now here, well, because everything's flat, it works fine. But once I start putting walls in, I've got a problem. Once I start putting tiles or walls or art, like imagine there's a back wall to this room, right? So let's take out a thing. So if there's a back wall to this room here, right, this kobold is going to be inside the wall. So what do you show? Well, this is what the Grape Juice Isometrics plugin is for, to make the walls show up and disappear and the doors show up and disappear, so we can get a little bit more simulated of what a video game looks like. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to a scene here where I've got tiles set up and I've got all the kobolds set up as well. And you can see that this kobold is outside the room. These kobolds are inside the room. There's basically 3 kobolds here that are outside the room, and then a whole bunch that are inside the room. If I look at my wall setup, it's an identical wall setup to before, with doors and everything. The problem becomes that when I log in a player view, so the problem here is that when I go in, this works fine. I can see most of the kobolds inside pretty well. But when I step to the outside, anything behind these walls, like is he in front of that wall? Is behind that wall? Super confusing, right? It doesn't work too bad, but it's not great, right? Right, it starts getting really confusing because I have things floating on walls and it's not perfect. So this torture test works okay, but it becomes pretty difficult to understand what's in front and what's behind. It's nice that the tokens always go in front of a wall, but it's not ideal. So let's go to how you fix this. So I'm going to go and I'm going to actually, I got that blue, let me turn off that blue grid a little bit. All right, so let me take, first of all, this wall right here, and we'll just fix this wall. So you can see that wall is just a tile. Great. So now I'm going to double click on it, and I can configure this as an isometric wall that appears and disappears depending on the vision of the token by clicking on this little wall icon right here and then selecting the wall that is at the base there. And I can go and hit the above alpha so that it shows up as 50%. He walks in, he can see all of the kobolds, right? And you can see that there's a wall here, but it's sort of half invisible. And then when he walks to the front of it, it's clear that it's a solid wall. So behind the wall, it's invisible. In front of it, it's a solid wall. That's the feature for walls. Equally with doors, you can get the doors to appear and disappear using the isometric plugin. So I can go to, let's grab this door, and selecting when you got all these tiles arranged is really difficult because you kind of have to like know the big boundaries. And then there's an extra feature here, which I'll cover later, but it's this pixel perfect selector. Now it mouses over. I can actually put my mouse over the thing that I want, grab it, double click on it, grab the door, grab the wall, make it 50% when I'm behind it, update the tile, go here. So now you see in the player view, the open door is invisible. Close the door and it shows up, right? So the door appears and disappears. And when I stand on this side of the door, the top side of the door, it's 50%, that alpha over, which is what I wanted. And then the other thing to notice is that on the GM view, those tiles that have the isometric stuff, unless I've got a player vision token selected, so let me unselect, you notice that they're invisible. So in order to get them to come back for the GM, say maybe if you need them to understand the scene, what you can do is you can go into the tiles, and then on the left side here, you can say, I want all of the tiles that are rigged to walls to either be fully visible, invisible, or like 50%, right? So I want them to be 50%. So now I've got all that. So let me go and switch to a completely done version of this isometric room. And let's go into it with the player view and let's see it. So here, I'm above these front walls and I can see the kobolds on the outside. When I stand in front of the wall, those walls look solid. But when I stand behind the wall, they're like 50%. Right, so it's pretty easy to navigate and understand what's what. On the outside of this room, no problem. Right, I can only see the kobolds that I have line of sight to, which is really nice. Right, and then when I go and open a door, boom, I'm inside the room, and it's pretty clear what's inside and what's outside of the room, right, because of that 50% transparency. So this is the torture test. This is as bad as it's going to get. You know, obviously in a full isometric room, in a real game, I would probably just not build this front wall. I would go with the diorama style, where I just don't build the walls that I'm always going to have to be seen through. Maybe have an outside version of the thing and then teleport to an inside version of the room. Would probably be better. But this is how this works, with walls, doors, and the above alpha setting to make things transparent as opposed to just totally invisible. Of course, I don't have to have them transparent. If I wanted that diorama look, I could just accomplish that by not setting the above alpha and leaving that at 0. All right, great. So next, let's get into some extra stuff. So we're going to switch over to the new version of things. So one thing that people notice is that, you remember that offset, the problem where I had to put in the negative height, negative width of the map in order to get that to work? Well, that also makes a whole bunch of other plugins not compatible with isometric, and there's a fix to that in the newest version. So let me go and show it not working. So I'm going to go to Manage Modules, and I'm going to go to the FX Master. Is probably the easiest example of something that doesn't work. So I load up FX Master, and let me go and activate this scene so I stay there every time. Right? I load up FX Master, go and turn on some rain. Save the changes, and no rain started. What the hell? Not get rain, but instead get clouds. Right? Let's take those clouds and let's make them really dense. Let's make them red, because why not? All right, so I start the clouds. There they are. So they're up and to the right. So they're way off, right? They're not in the right place, right? The space that it has for the clouds is way out here. So let's fix that. So I'm going to delete all the active effects. So the way to fix this is inside the settings. There's this new area called Enable Greg Wilson's Fix to Scene Offset. So if you check that, the problem is now this setting here is going to be off. You don't need that anymore because it fixes that problem. So all of your old maps will have to get repositioned and all of the tiles and walls and everything's going to be wrong. For all new scenes that you create going forward, probably a good thing. So I'm going to leave it checked for all of my new scenes, but I leave it unchecked for all the stuff where I've got the prep already done. So I'm going to click that, and then we're going to see what happens to it when I navigate to the map and navigate back. So now, you know, the tokens are in one spot and the map's over in another spot. So I'm just going to delete the token for now. And I'm going to, you know, clear the fog of war. And you can see this guy's way over to the right. So I'm just going to configure it. I'm just going to delete that offset fix that we did. Hit yes. And maybe I need it 0. And now this is fixed back over here. Of course, it's not aligned. So I'm going to have to configure it. Hit this button. Align the grid. Left to right. It's not perfect. Hit save. And there we go. And now I can go and drag out an actor. And he's here. All right. So that's the Greg Wilson's fix. You need to think about that for all future scenes going forward, but I wouldn't worry about it for your past scenes. The benefit now is that if I go to my FX master and I turn on some, let's turn on that clouds, immediately the clouds are going to show up in the correct spot. Here we are, clouds in my actual scene, right? So I can get that ambience back that I missed from top-down D&D or the hex trick. I can get that now in the isometric, in the grape juice. So this is awesome. One thing you'll notice though is that when I turn on stuff like rain, the rain's not going in the correct direction, right? The rain here is falling from top to bottom, but because of the isometric transform, it's wrong. This is really easy to fix. You just have to remember to do it. So you need to go and modify, you know, 50, don't set it to 50. You got to do it like a little quarter turn here. So if that's 50 and that's 100, you just need to set it to 75 for what you were expecting. So that's 75. And now I'm going to do it for the clouds as well, because the clouds should be moving in the direction of the wind, right? So you also want to set the clouds to around 75. Doesn't have to be perfect. So now the rain's falling and the clouds are going to start coming in, right? And they're going to start fading in and moving in the correct direction. So this is gorgeous. This looks perfect, right? This is what we've been waiting for, right? To have all of our top-down features also work in isometric. Okay, great. I already covered a little bit of that pixel perfect. So let's jump to our completed scene here, right? And remember that the reason that we can't see the walls in it is because I got to go to the tiles and say, show them at 50% as when I'm the GM, right? So here we are, tiles, show them at 50 when I'm the GM. Now selecting tiles here is really hard, right? Because it's which one's on top, and the selection boxes, like the hit boxes for the tiles, are very, very difficult. And like maybe like there's an individual tile here. Maybe I wanted to turn into a trap door or something. Well, to get that specific tile and select it really carefully just based on where my mouse is, you can go and use this pixel perfect selector, and now it turns purple based on which tile your mouse is actually over. Now I can select this individual tile and I can pull it out, and now I've got my trap door, right? If there's a secret door under there or something, I can pick it out in the middle of the game really easily. I can put it back really easily. Let me just click, select it, and then really carefully hold the shift key when putting it back. And there it is, right? I can hide it, lock it, whatever I want to do. Though I don't know how I'm going to get it back after I lock it. That's an interesting question. Ah, it's not so bad. Great. Yeah, so it works perfect. The other thing to look at is auto walls for tiles. So let me go find a good rock or something for tiles. Here we go. So let's go grab something that's just something in the way, and I want it to block a little bit of line of sight. So I'm going to grab these barrels. And so these barrels will block the line of sight for what's behind them using terrain walls. Now, normally with terrain walls, I would need to go to the walls, go to the terrain, then I have to really carefully kind of like map these out in order to get them to work well. But that takes time, don't want to do that. So Grape Juice put in a nice power feature into here where I can select terrain, then select this magic wand down here that's new, right? And then it moves into this pixel perfect selector, click it, and there we go. It's a basic outline of that as terrain walls. So now I can go and make sure that this is activated, switch into my player view, open this door, and there we go. I've got terrain walls all the way around these barrels. Very cool. So the next thing is a feature that you don't really have to worry about, which is the pixel perfect culling. So here in this example, we've got a warrior who's got a torch or something. So you can only see in a certain distance, right? And then certain walls start showing up because they're in the foreground layer because they're doors. And we don't want those showing up. It's because turning on the isometric plugin for a wall would make it always show up. And we don't want that because then you start seeing walls farther away than they should. They should pop in when they're illuminated by the player's torch or something. So here in the after version and the newest version of the module, those work. And when the character moves towards the wall, it'll pop in. Also, here's one that's got above alpha turned on, which is a new feature. So I will link to the kind of full documentation of the new feature support that that he dropped here at the bottom. But just as a reminder, I'm going to continue to cover isometric stuff. So check us out, subscribe. This is a fun experience, following along as Grape Juice gets this thing through early access and starts building out features with the goal of making isometric play really easy for everybody and fully featured. So it's sort of like a first-class citizen in the world of VTTs. All right, thanks everybody.